Happy Thursday, folks.
Hello.
Since we've got Tian on here and Derek, maybe we should chat about FreeBSD first. How's it sound, you gentlemen?
I don't know anything about FreeBSD.
You've got more history. I think that's the only reason I pick on you. Tian I pick on because he's on runtime spec, and that's where the PR is open on. Tian, if you had a chance to look at, well, I know you have had a chance to look at that PR.
I haven't had a chance to look at it since my first pass, but I can make another pass on it.
So I'm here sort of representing Doug because he has a schedule conflict with this time in the UK. So if there he made comments on I think the last round of comments, and if there are any other questions or anything else you want me to bring back to him, I can let him know.
I should probably ask James, are you here for the FreeBSD or are you joining us for other topics today?
Oh, I don't have any opinions on that. I'm just mostly listening.
Okay. Just making sure you weren't left out of any conversations there. Yeah, we were chatting about this last week, and I think the consensus was that we just didn't have a lot of folks that knew FreeBSD, and so that was probably one of the bigger reasons that it's not getting a lot of attention. All right, that's probably about as much conversation as I expected on that, which is probably not as much as you wanted to hear, Carmi. But am I saying it right, Carmi or Carmi?
Yes, you are saying correctly.
Wow,
It is correct. Yeah.
that's a rare day.
Okay.
So yeah, just given that it's probably a platform that a lot of people work in the container space don't have as much experience with. Did you hear anything from Sam? I know there was some discussion about whether to ping him.
I know that Sam and Doug had talked last week. And sorry, hold on, just sneeze. Sam and Doug had talked, and we have another call on Monday when we'll go over everything else. So that's where, as I understand it, has left.
Okay. Yeah, he's probably one of the few people that does know FreeBSD, even if he's not a maintainer over there. Just having someone that has a little bit more experience here might give you it might have a review that would have more weight than some of the rest.
Okay, I will pass that along.
Otherwise, Sajay, since you're here, I'll just kind of give you a heads up. There are a couple of image spec PRs that are sitting around that would be good to review whenever you have a chance. And then I had a few PRs that were sitting there over on distribution spec that I'm scratching my head and saying, should we just go ahead and close these out? So let me work on getting my screen sharing set up. I'll pull those up. Okay, I think I got the right screen here. So yeah, these have been sitting around for a little while, so I figured over on image spec that would be good if Sajay had a chance. Over on distribution spec, I think both myself and Tianan have looked at this as much as we can, and so this is just waiting for another maintainer. So maybe Derek, if you get a chance, I don't know if we can get any of the other maintainers to chime in on these, but they're pretty simple here. I think this one is just an easy close because they're taking out the test for a range for a streaming blob push, which is something we do not have defined in the spec, but I think we want to define the spec and not take it out of the conformance, because despite the fact that we haven't defined in the spec, it is the one blob push that is used by Docker by default everywhere, and so pulling this out feels like a mistake to me.
Yeah, and close it. I guess usually when you put a red mark, you want a person to close it themselves. It's usually the polite thing, but I can close it if.
I did. I figured maybe give them a chance to comment, but it's been sitting out there since May, and so I figure now is probably about the time to take this out. So I'll go ahead and knock that one out. This one's dependabot. I have no fear of offending dependabot because it broke all the CI trying to do this. It's bumping a version of some libraries, and because those libraries have golang.org/the X repo, it means that our Go version has to be updated as well. And I don't think we're in a rush to update our Go version.
Yeah,
So as soon
close
as we
it
do
out.
that, yeah.
I mean, that doesn't even matter here. Why do we even have these in here? Because they're only used for conformance anyways. And doesn't.
Is it in specs or is it, well, I should have looked which directory that was in. It was in conformance, so.
We have a separate Go module there already, so
So
yeah. No
theoretically, we
biggie.
could bump this if we wanted to. This one isn't as bad. I still want to completely rewrite conformance, so that
Yeah, but you don't need the dependabot messing around with it. You can just update it if you want to update it.
yeah. All right, so I'm going to close dependabot out here.
Do you want me to comment on that other one and close it for the patch
If
one?
you'd like.
Sure, I can do that. What was the? I need to read it though for the response, but
Yeah, 576, the issue is they're taking out the streaming blob push because we don't have it defined in the spec. And I think we should just define the spec.
yeah.
So my comments there, they never responded back from that comment. So I think it's worth the point we can take this one out if we want to. And I get why that keeps getting attention if it's not defined in the spec. People are like, why are you testing for it? It's a good question. But the fact that all the Docker pushes use that, that feels like something that's important to test.
Closed.
Awesome, thanks. Let's jump into Jeff's. I went ahead and moved you up to the top here, Jeff.
Well, I don't want to go first.
I knew you wouldn't, but I didn't want to go first either. I can do mine if we want to, but mine are just kind of reiterating things that we've already been chatting about.
Well, mine's reiterating things we've been chatting about. Maybe. Yeah, this is just I think the last few calls, we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, some sort of update to tag listing, that would allow for some additional data to be returned in a standard way. rather than doing a net new endpoint, you had discussed doing like a different accept header in order to kind of specify a different format. So this kind of follows that, and that's nothing set in stone. This is just a, hey, let's throw something out there and discuss it. So the idea here is adding in an accept header on the tag listing page, which can kind of put the registry into sort of a different mode that lets it support some additional query parameters. The response format changes to be more in line with kind of what we do for refers. That also makes it easier to kind of specify the content type of the response, but that also lets it be more of a graceful upgrade and downgrade. If clients request something, the endpoint will still work. If the registry doesn't support it, it'll still just use the existing last and end tags on there. But if the registry does support it, then it will support this additional information.
I haven't had a chance to go through this and really think it through in detail in terms of like test implementation, all that. The two things that kind of caught my attention, hopefully I can remember both of them here as I'm talking. One was if there's more than one tag, how do we handle multiple tags in here?
As of right now, they would be different entries because they would have different, presumably would have different timestamps when those tags were created.
Oh, so that's the timestamp. Okay.
Which matches the OCI layout.
Mm-hmm. Which that makes that a little bit easier. The second one was in the artifact type, where it mentioned if it's not set, we don't return artifacts. And I wonder if that's the right thing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This was a opinionated, yeah, in a strong opinion, weekly held in terms of going back to one of the PRs that Josh had opened up around, hey, we want to exclude the cosign tags by default, or a way to filter those out. This kind of makes it, hey, by default, we're only going to return tags for actual images. If you want to include other things as well, you can. Maybe there's a better way of, not necessarily doing a artifact type here. Maybe there's some images versus refers versus something that can be specified instead.
Yeah, we also need to include the untagged entries in here, which is going to be adding a complication into it.
I explicitly did not include untagged thing because this is a tag listing, and that would be a much larger change. I feel like that would be more of a manifest list endpoint.
But
I didn't want to bite off more than I had to.
with the format you've proposed, that would be an incremental change because it would just not have a ref name, right?
That is true. Yeah, all the other fields would be the same.
Yeah, I feel like the untag is pretty easy. The artifact type, I'm wondering if we need to have a way to do like a wild card in there or something to say, give us all images and all artifacts. I need to know everything versus I need to know only about these specific artifact types or only these images. So I think the direction I'm going there is I'm looking for, there's an A, there's a B. I'm looking for how do I also do a C, which is how do I list everything? And see, Sajay hadn't chimed in yet, but I remember one of the comments he was looking for in the past was how do we get the history of a tag? To say for a given tag, what are all the previous things that have pointed to it, all the previous digest?
I really like this because it's kind of scoped to what the tag listing API is. Honestly, I think if we can solve the how do we return everything, that would probably complete what we're looking for, like non-exclusion, in some form. Is there provision for, let's say, for example, Docker Hub or another cloud provider to return their annotations that's not in the manifest in this? Say, for example, something that's specific to the provider, or is it going to be all annotations that we put here are hoisted from the manifest itself?
I say I think that this should be more of like this is the bare minimum that we need to specify. I would say if the provider includes additional annotations, that's probably fine. Clients can choose to read them or ignore them. But I don't think there's anything in here to say they can't exist.
Okay, that's great, because what I'm hoping is that if we put the spec language indicating that, hey, these annotations are coming from the manifest, then that's almost like saying that we cannot add additional annotations. But if we say that, hey, this is an open set of annotations that may be brought from the manifest, then the additional annotations can be ignored. It's just about how you want to work what verbiage we want. That's all I was asking.
My comment is more along the lines of giving more querying capability, I guess. Is it possible to have like a JSON path query? So it's not just limited to, let's say, artifact type. You can basically query, give me all the tags that will have a specific annotation, and the annotation is not like defined by the spec. It just, we say it's a JSON path, so you can do all kinds of permutations like ands, nots, and whatnot.
I think my pushback on that one would be that would probably increase the difficulty of implementing by at least an order of magnitude. As of right now, I would think, well, at least from like the Docker Hub scale of things, this is something that we could implement pretty easily. And I would think that at least the tag name, the digest, and the timestamp where they're created are all fairly generic fields. Trying to support a large tag listing with sort of advanced querying capability it's definitely something that we would not be able to support. Not saying that just because we can't, no one can, but I would probably leave that out as like a requirement, just because you're going to get far less adoption that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think we should make it a required thing. It's more a capability, I guess, which is negotiated.
If we're saying these are required, are we saying that every registry must keep track of the creation date?
I would say if you are supporting this type of tag listing, yes.
Well, wouldn't that create like backward compatibility problems?
I mean, that's kind of the reason that there's an accept header in there. If you don't pass the accept header, then you just default back to the existing behavior, which is just returning a list of names. If you are implementing the registry and you are saying that, yes, I will do this new format, then yes, you must return the data that is required for that format.
Are these three annotations required, or is it like it may return annotations? How we? I'm sorry, I didn't read the whole PR.
I mean, right now there's just two annotate. Well, there's two annotations listed here. One of them is the tag name, which is already returned in the existing response, and then the timestamp. So really, the only new one is a timestamp. But
Right, and are we saying that it's required, or is it more like an optional thing?
I would say it's required, because if you don't care about the timestamp, then just then there's not really much benefit over the existing tag listing.
That's fine. I mean, yeah, it's just kind of like clarifying. I'm fine making it required. I don't have any concerns on that.
So I'll push back a little bit that there's no added value here, because I feel like if I give you a response that is here are all my tags and here are all the digests for each of those tags, that does have a value add to people. And I currently have content on the registry where I do not know the creation time of the tag and of the manifest. Because right now my content is backed by an OCI layout, and so everything here is already existing. I will just return that exact OCI layout, but I don't have that creation time in there today.
Can we say the field is required, but you can set it to epic time? I don't know, some
Yeah,
default.
no, that makes sense. I mean, I think if we define a default, maybe that's okay, as long as we get input from others. The other thing I see as super value in this is you've kind of implicitly introduced chronological sorting, which has been a pain for a long time, right? Like we've always wanted to see, hey, what are the latest tags and things like that. This is really solves that problem also in one way.
Yeah, that was
And
the
is that,
primary driver.
yeah, no, totally. And are we are we changing the order? Like, are we saying that there is some implicit order in this, or what's your statement here?
There's introducing two new query parameters, a sort by and then a sort order. So you can actually do a sort by timestamp, and then a ascending descending option on that.
Yeah, you have my total support.
So right now, when I'm looking at the predefined annotations in image spec, the image creation time does not specify a time zone at all. It just says it needs to follow the RFC. Do we want to specify that those times must be in UTC? Or do we not care?
I just copied that off of the refers thing, so I think that it's going to follow the same thing that refers does.
The same thing refers does. Not following. I don't think refers specifies the creation time, does it?
It's in the example a few lines down. Yeah.
So we might. So the refers will bubble up the content that already exists. So
True.
But in this case, the creation time is when you pushed it, not the creation time on the image manifest, correct?
Correct. It's more the created time of the tag, not the manifest.
Yeah. So that's where I'm kind of going slightly different from the refers.
So I guess maybe that would justify a different. Maybe it should be the image ref created instead of just image created.
Yeah, we need to clarify. We need to make sure that people know that's where it's coming from, which is one of the reasons I don't necessarily have the data. I don't know what time it was created. I can probably do a timestamp on when the manifest file was created and pull that up if I really need to try to force a value in there.
So are we looking at a ref created here instead of image created? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, this is not the time that someone created the manifest on a
okay,
Docker
that makes
image
sense.
build. This is the time they did the push to the registry.
Yeah, I think that's what made sense to me, because the image could have been built quite some time back also.
Yeah, that's really interesting and resolves the thing that I was commenting about in now that's possible. You could return the image creation timestamp and the ref created timestamp. I like that symmetry. Simple fixes. I dig it.
So Jeff, which one do you want to prioritize? I'm guessing the both are important for different use cases, but you wanted to hoist a ref created is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think in terms of the tag listing, I'd prefer to do the ref created, but
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Great.
I think that could be like an optional, maybe registries do both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he's trying not to boil the ocean, but I like that he's doing so in a way that leaves room for boiling the ocean later.
Totally. That's why I was clarifying on the fact that we could, like, I wanted to use the annotations for something else. This gives me a way to kind of like at least put in more stuff that maybe other tools can use downstream. Because we've been building our own tag listing API and different kinds of indexes and whatnot. But this is really opening up a way in which we can use the tag listing much more constructively rather than a lexical ordering, right? Which is almost useless in many of the use cases today.
Speaking of boiling oceans and more annotations, do we have thoughts on what some common additional annotation here might be? I'm thinking along the lines of the pull count the last time the image was pulled at, star counts, all those kind of details.
I'll give you a use case that I just discussed yesterday. Whether there are refers. Right. The problem is we wanted to sync a set of tags and we wanted to get the tag, like the child objects and whatnot, and we didn't want to go to a head or a refer API call on top of that. So if we could, we were thinking of, can we return more metadata in our APIs other than, but if this is there, then we probably try to see if we can build on top of this.
If this was returning all manifests, not necessarily just the tag manifest, you could also potentially have the refers in this listing here, and then there will be an annotation that says this refers to this is the subject.
I'm scared. We have repositories with millions of manifests in them, so I don't want that API. I mean, but again, yes, I'll leave that for another day.
But if you sort it by the creation time, then someone could just keep track. Were the new refers that were just pushed since I last checked? Oh, there is. Let me pull those individual ones.
But I also see where Jeff is trying to scope this to tag listing only, right? So I love the manifest listing API, but I'm not going to go there today. I'm going to put my blinders on and say, hey, this is tag listing and let's make tag listing better. I'll take that.
Yeah, for right now, this is very much, we have a pretty severe and immediate need on essentially providing update, like a last updated on tags in a more scalable, performant way. So that was kind of the primary concern. I agree. I would love doing manifest listing. I would love kind of adding more things, but trying to do let's scope it as minimally as possible, provide immediate value, and then we can figure out what else we can do later.
So let me pick on one other thing here, which is the last query parameter. This harkens back to all of the pagination discussions we've had in the past and saying, well, what if the registry did the ordering and they came up with the next header and we followed that instead of doing the last and all those other things? So I'm wondering if this is going back to the old way when we want to go forward with the new way. Which is another way of saying, what if you didn't get the choice to pass the last, but if the registry is doing pagination, it can come back and say, this was the first page, query your second page using the normal pagination methods. Yeah, we did it there, but there is the link headers I'm looking at. So if the registry only supported the link header and didn't support last, would that break any of your use cases?
I mean, I don't think so. It's more the link is going to have to provide some information to the server to tell it how to page. And so the link is implicitly going to have a last parameter in it anyway.
So yes, but, and the but here is that the registry can do whatever it's doing on its side to keep track of how it wants to keep track of this. If the
It
last
could have
header is
something-
controlled, yeah, you can keep a session ID in there, and then the registry is just playing out a whole session of tags and a pagination, or it might, do whatever it wants to do. Whereas if the client is passing that last header in there, you're relying on the client to keep track and do that correctly.
Yeah, like a query cursor value. Whereas tag name is inherently squishy. Something that will, depending on sorting, insertion will screw that up, and you'll either get extras or not get enough.
There's theoretically that if the registry kept track of all those pages, if I was querying through the tag listing and I'd use the last header, that someone could push a tag in between when I started and got to that page. If the registry was keeping track of that as a session, it might show me an older state that said, here was the old version of the tag. Where if the client was doing it, the client would just miss that that tag existed at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, we can update it, and that could just be an optional type of thing where you just follow the link. Registries can choose to keep doing the last format if they want, or not. Doesn't really matter at that point. I guess then it's an implementation detail.
If we make a registry choice, it makes the client's life harder. If we say you must, for the new API, it only supports the link header, that would simplify it for the clients because they only have to do one thing. I'm thinking back to when we added the text here because there was a whole big long debate of supporting this, and there were clients in there that only knew how to do the link header or the last query parameter that were getting broken by registries that only support the link header. And then we were trying to figure out who actually supports one versus the other, and it turned out that I thought most places were doing just the link header.
Yeah, I don't have any strong opinions on that.
And at least from the registry implementation, for me, the link header, if I needed to, would just be that last parameter. Just the registry is passing it to the client versus the other way around. That's a way that can be implemented pretty easily there if you didn't want to maintain any kind of session state. All right, we've been picking this one apart pretty good here. I think we gave you a whole bunch to go back and think about. The one I'm going to throw out there is maybe we should document the list of annotations and be ready. I think we didn't document those. And so I think it would be good to get that in a section and then make that something that we can say, these are the ones that are required, these are the ones that are optional, so that we can append more to this list and do it in a way that there's interoperability, so that we don't have the Docker Hub last pull time, last pull time versus the ACR last pull time. Everybody use the same annotation if we start adding new ones in here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But what if I want those to be different annotations because I want to write a super registry that gives me the last poll time across several different registries? Sorry, Brandon. I'm mostly joking.
I know you're baiting me. I'm just like, do I take the bait or not?
No, don't take the bait. It's a joke. Don't take the bait.
All right. Welcome, Mike. Good to see you joining it. In case you're curious, we are chatting about 579, which is Jeff's proposal for improving the tag listing.
Let's get spicier instead, Brandon. Let's talk about annotations that aren't string values.
They don't
Oh,
exist.
is that on the agenda? I'm sorry,
Wait,
not on the
what?
agenda. Can't talk about that.
What? At least make them ASCII. Never mind.
No, it's JSON. It's already spec mandated to be UTF-8.
There you go.
But I mean like objects, not encoding a JSON object as a string in JSON. It's kind of insane.
So
But
again,
alas,
I'm not
that's
going to take the bait.
historical. Yep. We can't take that bait.
So not
too
taking
late.
that bait. We got a fair bit of time here. And I think this is a good opportunity because Derek is here. We don't sit here around as often as we should.
I just pushed an update to this. I
Did you really?
I went onto my
Awesome.
branch and there was like a mid rebase. I don't remember what I was trying to change though, so I just pushed it up as it was. The missing aspect is originally Josh said we should document the query parameter, and I added documentation for the query parameter in the first version. But now we don't have documentation for query parameter, so there's not really anything else to add anywhere.
When you say document the query parameter, I'm looking here and it defines.
Oh, if you
query
looked at the
parameter.
old version, there was like a table with like query parameters, but that's gone.
Yeah, I'm looking at it thinking this looks like documentation to me. So, gotcha.
I think this is just how we do it now, so I don't think that's such a big deal. But I thought there was something else we had talked about. There was another change we had talked about doing for adding the definition of the namespace, but I don't know if I had a work in progress of that somewhere else, but or if it just doesn't need to be part of this PR. I mean, I think it's pretty clear what the namespace parameter is. I think the worry was terminology, if I'm introducing new terminology here without explaining it above. Like we purposely removed the word mirroring everywhere, which I think originally it used. Now it's just about the proxy.
I know a feature that I'm going to want to get at some point if we implement this is a way to specify in a reference I'm querying for this image and I want to pull it with this namespace. So I'm querying this registry, but send this namespace parameter to the registry to have some way to specify that. Because today, if we have a proxy server, I can say I want to pull this image from this proxy server directly. And I don't have a way to go to this proxy server, but pass it this namespace so that it pulls it from this other registry.
Yeah, wait, what is the missing about that from here?
Today I can say docker pull proxy.company.co/alpine latest, whatever. And it'll say I'm a proxy server for whatever upstream registry. I'm just going to grab this image and send it back to the user. If the registry now has proxying enabled, or the namespacing enabled here, it might be proxying 5 different registry servers. And so if I say do a docker pull on proxy.example.co /alpine latest, can I say square bracket namespace equals Docker Hub? Can I put some kind of field in there?
The point of that is kind of the client could, but that's reverse of what a client should do in that case. Like the client should just pull Docker or just the normal namespace and then just be configured to go to this proxy. So the proxy should be almost transparent to the client in that case. Like you shouldn't say pull proxy dot something. You should just pull your image and you should say proxy equals, like tell it what proxy it's doing, or like configure the proxy somewhere. You don't configure the namespace. Like don't say pull it from proxy dot registry and use this namespace. Like no, you just pull the namespace and you say use this proxy.
So that's the happy path. I'm looking at the slightly less happy path where people are debugging things, or like something's wrong with the proxy. Let me go ahead and run a query through there directly and see what's going on.
I mean, you could curl it. I mean, sure, but that's all on the client.
There is an alternative motive there, which is if I was able to get that namespace parameter included in somehow in the reference, I'm looking to use a very similar thing to when I'm querying a OCI layout, which is pull this image from an OCI layout that is tagged :latest, but oh, by the way, it is the latest from this image that I copied from this other registry. There might be 7 different latest images in that same OCI layout, but they're coming from different registries, different repos.
I mean, that's not really related to the distribution spec, though. In my perspective.
That's why I say it's an ulterior motive where I'm like going 3 steps down the path here of if I get this in there in the reference, then I can use it for other important things.
I mean, yeah, the reference can be anything. And that was the discussion we had before, which is how much of the do we explain what the reference really means here? The reason I called it namespace and not reference or host path is it's just whether a namespace is a domain or whatever, it doesn't really matter from the registry perspective or the perspective here. Like Docker IO is a namespace, but it's not actually a registry endpoint. You know, like it's doesn't really matter what the naming is. The only issue is that today we strip some of the name and don't give it to the registry, and this is just making sure we don't strip any information.
Okay, you just stepped on landmine there. You said Docker.io, and that's not really a registry, and that's right. It's registry-1.docker.io, or pick. There are multiple in there. You got a choice. What is the namespace value when you're proxying Docker Hub?
It could be whatever. I mean, it's up to the client. We don't set the namespace, but we would set it to Docker IO on Containerd if you go somewhere else. But we don't set Docker IO.
So if a client said registry-1.docker.io, the proxy would be like, I don't know who you're talking about.
You could set it. We don't set it on Containerd because we know the registry endpoint already handles it, but you could.
TNon's always got the full list here.
I probably shouldn't say this on a recorded line, but that's not actually the full list. That's just the full list that I feel comfortable committing in a public repo.
Yeah. If I'm a proxy server and I see a namespace for different values of Docker Hub, am I allowed to consolidate all those to one?
I mean, yeah, you could. You do whatever you want on the proxy side. The idea here is the namespace is just it's how the client is referring to it more than anything. So we say that clients refer to Docker Hub images as Docker IO, even if that's different from what the registry host name is. Maybe that's us just hoping that someday it will actually be Docker IO domain, but
If that ever happens, that would be like the most monumental what took so long change ever.
it would probably just break everything somehow.
But it would be a spectacular breakage.
Yeah.
Yeah, for every other registry, I'm assuming it's just the registry host name. GHCR.io.
It certainly makes sense. This was like, yeah, way back in the day before these decisions were made, before there was even like third-party registries probably, so.
Well, there's only one registry that doesn't follow that pattern, and so that's why it's the landmine to step on. But for all the other ones,
Yeah.
if it's just the host name, that makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to have a 3-letter domain as well there, but yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, doesn't cause too many headaches for me anymore.
And you're trying to register DCR.io?
I thought there was like DKR or something. I don't remember. For this specifically, let's see. There's one comment on here that I don't remember looking at, but I think more, what are the specific changes we should consider? Just get it in. I don't think anybody's opposed to it. It's just wordsmithing. Or my impression is it's just wordsmithing. Is that your impression as well?
I think wordsmithing back in the day, it was, do we have examples? But we definitely do have examples. So that's no longer a problem right now. The only thing I'm looking at for this comment is that this is probably the only place we talk about authorization credentials in the entire spec.
Yeah, I only call this, I mean, we don't really need to call it out. It's kind of like something that should be generally known, like properly handle your credentials, but I mean, I don't mind removing it. It should be
Okay.
common sense, but
How about moving it into an implementer's note? And so it's just, hey, FYI, implementers don't do this easy foot gun, but it's not part of the spec itself.
yeah. Yeah, that's reasonable. Where do we have the implementers notes?
They're in the spec other places. It's just we take out the should not capital letters in there and just pretty much say just about what you're saying there, but just kind of prefix it was just saying, here's like a little implementation note.
Yeah, make sure you think about credentials. Don't just send them to random endpoints.
Yeah. So something like implementers note here, class may impose a limit of so many characters on it. So we've got that scattered throughout different places.
Okay. But without the should language on implementer note.
Yeah, so the should
when
not
it
is
is a
spec
should,
language.
did you want to include the a proper error then if the creds are required but not provided for the proxy?
I don't think that's in scope for this.
Okay.
In theory, the proxy can return the www authenticate from the upstream, but then it is still up to the client to explicitly allow that. Like, because this registry host said, hey, oh, I'm trying to proxy for Docker Hub, and it sends you a www authenticate to like the Docker token server. Doesn't mean you should say, hey, I'm talking to the Docker token server. Let me go ahead and use the Docker credentials to get something from the Docker token server and then pass it off to this registry. So that's the type of stuff that clients should already be thinking about, not just in this case.
I guess it sort of behooves us then to at least consider on the client side that the API that we're interfacing with said client has some capability to round trip and tell them, hey, a proxy is involved, right? In this case. So do you want to use different creds, right?
Yeah, I mean that's really up to the client and how it wants to manage that. Like even I don't
like
even
you
think
said, that's why it's not in scope. That's fine. That's fair.
I mean, I don't even know if that would be in scope for the authorization working group either, because it's not really about the protocol. It's about how the client wants to, how much the client actually trusts the proxy, I guess.
You're
Like-
right. I'm mixing OCI and CRI. So yeah.
Yeah, like if I'm trying to put say a transparent proxy set up for kind of my own personal use, I might, just enable it so that just treat it as if it's the upstream always, and use the credentials for it, and it'll just pass through the authorization. Maybe I want to do that. That's perfectly legitimate, but you definitely shouldn't accidentally do that.
So I want to mix in a CR conversation here, which is, has anybody made a registry proxy today that is scoped to the user doing the request? So you can pass through and say, I'm Blob trying to talk to Docker Hub, and Jane tries to talk to Docker Hub, and the proxy will give them only images that they're allowed to access individually.
Yes. But it's not public.
It's not public. Okay.
I mean, yeah, in theory,
it's on my list to write. That's why it's, sorry,
Yeah.
Derek, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, in theory, the proxy could even validate the JWT as well coming in. So I mean, it's certainly possible to do that on like a per registry basis, understand the user.
Yeah, I was thinking the proxy could man the middle of the request, basic author, run its own token server to keep track of what users are going through it. And then as it goes upstream, it keeps track, does Alice, Bob, whoever have access to each one of these things, and give them back the appropriate response to what they have access to.
Yeah,
So
I think what would be the confusing case there is if you needed like some sort of like double authentication, like I had to authenticate to the proxy and then pass in like some pass-through authentication as well. Because the complicated there is like if you log into the proxy, then the proxy still has to figure out how to authenticate to the upstream. And if
you send your password to the proxy, logging into the proxy, it can man the middle and pass that same credential upstream to Docker Hub.
Yeah, if it's the same. As I said, with at least with JWTs, it's not too hard because the proxy only needs to like validate a key, and you could just configure it to validate against that public key. So that's pretty easy. If it's like password, then the proxy, I guess, would just have to get, or like just, oh, does this work upstream? Then I guess it's good. Then I'll keep it, but it's not quite as foolproof, I guess.
Yeah, keeping track of usernames works really great until all the usernames are underscore token or whatever the default username is for the token request. Sorry, that was a slight tangent there.
Okay, so I'll put that in an implementer's note if we still think that's relevant to have in there. I guess, do we think it's relevant?
I think it's useful knowledge. It just doesn't need to be spec language because we haven't done any kind of authorization in here in the spec yet.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
I mean, and that line is kind of not even relevant to the namespace parameter.
Yeah.
It's more relevant to the general idea of registry proxying.
Yeah, I think it fits in as a nice implementer note because it's a definite foot gun. People can screw that up.
And it has been screwed up many times. Okay. That's a easy
Cool.
update.
All right. There was one other here on the list. I don't think we have time to chat about it today, but just as an FYI, if you have thoughts on this, Derek or Mike or anybody else, there is a weird edge case when you're doing a chunked upload where you start the chunked upload session where you say, let me get the post and get the URL I want to do my blob upload to. And before you send the first patch, you do a GET request to that upload URL and say, what is my current status? Maybe your first patch request failed. Maybe you're just trying to ping the server and break things. The range is supposed to come back in that GET request that says, here's the current state of where you're at. And the second number in there is supposed to be the end of the range. The end of the range isn't 0 because 0 would imply you've already sent the 0th byte. So the end of the range is going to be -1 possibly, but that causes chaos everywhere. So I just want to throw this out there and make sure it's on your radar to think about to see if there's a way this should normally be handled in upstream places or how registries are doing today. Yeah, it's it can't be 0, because that implies the first byte has been sent. Because then that would say the end of the range is 0, your next byte is going to be 1, you 0 index all your bytes, so now you're off by 1. That's it. That's all I got.
Because 0 minus 0 is 1. That's right. It's a special case in math.
It's the weird thing that the range is inclusive of that byte. And so if you say I've gone to byte 0, you're saying my end byte is the 0th byte. You index by 0, so you've already sent 1 byte. Breaks everything.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, just don't have the range header. The best way to say nothing.
Yeah, or don't have an end or something. I don't
Unset.
know.
Unset. I love it. True
Yeah.
enough. That actually does sound like a pattern that would work. Is it currently done though? Will it break somebody? Having it unset? I like it.
Probably going to break somebody.
Yeah.
But as an edge case, we should think about. So I wanted to keep it on the radar there.
I feel like I've seen that 0-0 range somewhere as like in testing. And
Well,
never
there
really
is,
thought of it as including a byte, but I guess it makes somewhat sense.
I think somewhere they got a 0-1 for the -1 in some of their testing. And so they're like, where did this come from? Why did this happen? And they realized that it was someone passing a range header for the first. Yeah.
Yeah, -1 definitely doesn't seem right. But
that was, I think it was a 0 length blob is what was happening, which is also a question of whether that should be allowed, but yeah.
Well, then can a content length be set in that case to?
I have to dig through all the specs and sort it out. It's a weird edge case.
Yeah. Sure. Of course,
All
it
right.
runs into every weird edge case. All right, later on.
Great conversation. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. We didn't chat about, but next week, 4th of July is the day after, so I don't know if folks are going to be out or not. So chat in Slack if you're going to be here or not be here. We'll sort it out. Have a good one.
Cheers.